Why don't we go ahead and get started? This is a regularly scheduled meeting for the Board of Finance, being held in a very irregular way, although it's becoming our new normal. And so the members of the Board of Finance and several invited people are connected by Zoom, and we are streaming live. We will also have live television coverage for the public hearing, which will begin at 6.
Mr. Chairman, could I just spoke to Lisa. She is aware the time is starting. She's having trouble coming on via Zoom, and so she's going to try to do it by telephone.
Okay, thanks, Art. Appreciate it. We'll wait a minute then before we conduct any business. There she is.
Lisa here.
Oh, Lisa, thanks. Good. All right, so we have a quorum for the Board of Finance. There are representatives of the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Ed, also on the call, as well as town staff, and we appreciate everyone being here. Before I actually begin the meeting, I think it'd be very appropriate to recognize all those that have been affected by this most horrible pandemic, both from a health standpoint for family directly and indirectly, but also financially. And those that have been both, from a health, okay, a little background noise. I just want to let you know that this budget process is going on with all the knowledge of all of the hardships that everyone has endured. And it'd be also appropriate to have a shout out to those who supported us through all of this. That's obviously the first responders, both police and healthcare providers, but also those that work in public facing positions like at the grocery stores and the livery people. And so we're really thinking about all of you and glad that you can at least participate in this process. We're having a public hearing in which the public was not invited. That's a little bit unusual, but we hope that we can share your comments that you provided with us later when we get to that. And before we have the Pledge of Allegiance, we're going to ask the participants that are on this call by Zoom to mute yourself unless you have something to say. But we really encourage you to have something to say, but just make yourself known by old-fashioned wave or raise your hand, and we'll make sure that we unmute you so that you can contribute. So I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. All right? I'm going to stand up for that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rob, before you begin, I'm trying to get online on my laptop. I'm on my phone and I can't mute on my phone. So as soon as I'm connected, I'm going to go off my phone and switch to the laptop.
Okay, I'll wait just a second.
Do you have me?
We can hear you. Well, there you are. All right. You're still showing up as being on the phone. Did you hang that up?
I believe I did.
Okay. All right. We have you. We have your face in office. That's great.
That's good enough.
All right. Again, so if you'd like to contribute, make your presence known. We'll be watching and certainly chime in. Just for the lay of the land, we're going to conduct a normal Board of Finance meeting. Then we will open a public hearing on the budget. And at that time, we'll present the budget both from the Board of Finance, the Board of Education, and the Board of Selectmen's perspective. We will share the public comments and questions that we've received by email prior to 4 o'clock today. And then we'll finish with next steps and where we go from there. So the first order of business for our meeting would be to approval of minutes from the April 7th meeting. And I've reviewed them. I think they're accurate. Does anyone have any comments or edits they want to suggest? So hearing or see none, if the Board of Finance members will unmute yourself, I move that we adopt the minutes as presented.
Second by Lisa.
And everybody else voted aye. So Karen, you can record that was unanimous. The next item is the Finance Director's report. So Amy, you're up.
So there's actually nothing really to report on it. It's just a continuation of the items that have been on there. We had one additional donation from the Friends of Simsbury Farms for a tee box leveling project at the Simsbury Golf Course for $12,000. And then just the defined contribution and deferred compensation pension plans, the RFQ update. It's just on there for consistency, but there's no additional updates from the last meeting.
Rob, you need to unmute yourself.
Rob, it appears that you're talking, but you're muted.
That's one for me. Keep score, please. Thanks, Art. The next item would be the appointment of auditor for the fiscal year 1920 audit.
Yep, so this is something that you guys do every year. OPM requires that we submit to them on a yearly basis who we've appointed as our auditor. So after you all take action, we submit that to the state, and then we have until May 31st, I believe, to do the submission. So we just need your formal approval so that we can make that submission.
So I need a motion, which was provided in our package, to move effective April 21st, 2020, to appoint Bloom Shapiro as the town of Simsbury's auditors for the fiscal year ended 2019/2020.
So moved.
Moved by Linda.
And then second.
All right, we have a move and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? None. So that passes. So with that, and again, we do not need to wait till 6 o'clock for this. It probably is 6 o'clock, almost. We can move ahead with the presentation, or would you prefer we wait?
No, you can move ahead with the presentations. You just can't start the public comments on the record until 6, but we'll be past 6 by the time that happens.
Okay. All right. So let's go to the slide deck. Pull that up. So again, just as an introduction, my name is Rob Pomeroy. I'm the chairman of the Board of Finance. And tonight we host this annual meeting to review the progress we've made as 3 boards on the budget process. And tonight we will present the operating and capital budgets, as well as the Board of Education and Board of Selectmen budgets. The budget, as I said, I'll present for us. Susan Salinas will present for the Board of Ed, and Eric Wellman will present for the Board of Selectmen. And then we will have a public hearing opened, and we'll read the comments that we've received from taxpayers in town. So this really is a collaborative effort. It starts in the fall. We have a budget planning by each of the boards and departments, but we get together for a tri-board meeting, usually late November, early December. This year we waited till we had the newly seated boards, but we get a chance to look at the challenges that we face and interact with the staff and the town manager and try to lay out a framework for the budget making process. Each of these boards has a different mission, and so we come at the budget process in a different way. But the Board of Selectmen, they're all about providing services to the town, which include plowing, recreation, public works, social, library, and the like. Board of Ed, of course, is tasked with best education possible for the money, access for special needs, and maintaining the excellent reputation of our Simsbury School District. And our job is to find a balance between all of the wants and needs that we have and our ability to pay. And to maintain fiscal discipline, we must balance the budget, and we do that by setting the ultimate tax rate. Amy? So each of us, although we have our own missions, we have inner and overlapping stakeholders. And all of us that live in town, we pay taxes. We benefit from the work of the town. Our children are educated by the Board of Ed. We employ teachers and citizens of town that are our employees. So these are the people that are the stakeholders. And it's our challenge to find a balance, how to serve all of them and yet make it fiscally responsible. Amy? So the Board of Finance is a citizen oversight board. We are elected. We have 6-year overlapping terms. And our job is to conduct a public hearing on the proposed budgets. We actually approve the operating and capital budgets for the town and the Board of Ed. We establish the mill rate. And then during the year, when necessary, we'll do supplemental or emergency appropriations and transfers. We're also responsible for making sure that we raise the capital that we need through the public markets, along with the help of and the challenge of the Board of Selectmen. So in addition, the town has employees, both union and non-union, that are receive pension benefits. And so we're responsible for managing and overseeing those pension trusts and OPEB, post-employment benefit trusts. Next. We set out criteria. These tend to be more or less the same every year, but we want to ensure that we are thinking about the long term. We have a goal of maintaining debt service to the amount of our capital outlay, under 6.7% of expenditures. We want to be sure that the mill rate is appropriate, and in the light of the COVID, although when we first started planning for this, it wasn't even a glimmer on the horizon. That's how fast it's moved in. But we targeted a flat or reduced mill rate after we started to see the massive impact of the pandemic. We enjoy a AAA rating from Moody's, and we got there the hard way by being very disciplined about how we borrow money and how we balance budgets and the level of reserves that we keep. And we want to be sure that we have adequate reserves to deal with surprises. Obviously, the changes we're experiencing now are among the most severe that we've experienced as a town. And then again, we work very cooperatively with town management and the boards. Next. I lost Amy. I can't there you go. Thanks.
It's me, Rob. It's not Amy.
Okay, I'm Melissa. All right.
It froze for a second. Sorry. Go on.
Okay. All right. So, we do have and we're recognized as a town with very strong financial ratings, healthy reserve levels. All of this is important when we go to borrow bond money. It gives us the most advantageous cost of capital. The history of our mill rates going back 5 years has been fairly flat. We had a jump in fiscal year 18. That was able to come down a little bit in 19 because it was a revaluation year. When you have a revaluation year, there are winners and losers. Some people's properties go up, some people's go down. But generally speaking, the overall grand list goes up at the reval time, so the mill rate comes down. And we were at 37.32 for the fiscal year we're in. Kudos to our staff going back a long period of time. We always get the Excellence in Financial Reporting Award for 20 years running. All right, Melissa. So when I say balance the budget, that's what we need to do on an annual basis. And we have money that goes out to pay for the cost of our children's education, operating expenses for the town, Parks and Rec, Public Works, police, library, non-public schools. What we get in is revenue primarily from property tax, automobile property tax. And then we do get some capital or financing from both the state and federal. And then we also charge fees for some of the services that we provide. Next. And we do this in an environment where we are taxing the property taxes against the grand list. We've had a meaningful and significant increase in the grand list from the current year we're in to projected for the 2020-21. These are the projects that have been in the works over a number of years. The apartment complexes as well as the solar project that was put into the town. So 2.66% increase in the grand list for the projected year that we were creating the budget for. And then further, more modest increases in the coming years projected based on known projects that we can see coming down the pike. Next. So in order to figure out what the taxes are, it's two simultaneous equations. You take the assessed property values, that's the grand list, times the mill rate, and that'll tell you what the property taxes are. Or said another way, the mill rate has to equal the property taxes needed divided by the assessed property values. All right, next. So the Board of Finance operating budget guidelines back at our tri-board meeting was a 2.5% cap on operating expenditures and 2% cap on mill rate increase. These were the guidelines that we gave to the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen. We also have a debt service capital. And when we got the proposed and requested budgets, after several meetings by each board, every board, interaction between boards, where we ended up is a slight increase in the actual expenses by about 109%. And then if you go to the next slide, this describes the budget drivers. They're always, our biggest outlay in any year is for salaries on both Board of Ed and in the town. And a lot of these are under contractual agreements, salary increases with step and level increases. We also have to contribute and keep the pension funded, debt service, teachers' retirement system, grand list growth at 2.6%. These are the drivers that help us work on the budget. So if you go back to my equation slide, if we're going to spend 102.4 million, that means we have to bring in 102.4 million. And so we get state aid, which is known and in the governor's budget, 6.4 million, and non-tax revenue, 3.6 million. The balance has to come from the two taxes, property taxes and auto tax. Next slide. So based on the increased grand list, the slight increase in expenditures applied against a larger grand list, the mill rate actually goes down to 37.09. We thought it was very important as a collective group of boards that we come in with a lower mill rate. We recognize that the savings on a median home tax is a modest $50, but it's the direction that's important. And we're able to deliver the services that we believe are important to the town and educate our children with the quality of education that is so important to the quality of life we have here in town. One of the things that the Board of Selectmen has done, and this is a program that was part of an executive order from Governor Lamont indicating to the towns that they can offer one or both of two tax relief programs. So the Board of Selectmen has approved these two tax relief programs. The first is a tax deferral program. I'm not going to read this in detail. We're going to ask you to get all of your, there's a lot of information available on our website, but it basically allows you to defer paying your July 1st property tax bill until October 1st. There is a application that's required that where you have to demonstrate a need or some negative impact from the coronavirus. I won't go into that in detail, but this will help those, especially that have been furloughed or laid off during the months March through June, July. The second program, next slide, is, and again, these are websites that you can, our websites where you can go and find the details of these programs. Second is a reduction in interest rate. Statutory rate of interest for late payments on property tax is 18%. And this tax relief program will allow you to reduce that to 3% for up to 90 days. Again, there is a need. All residents are eligible for this program. All right. If you have details, you certainly should reach out. One of the other big components of our budget is the ability to pay for the debt that we use to acquire capital projects primarily. And we've been using this slide for several years, trying to show what we have to spend and what we have already committed to spend for coming tax years as it relates to the blue line, which is the 6.7% of capital expenditures as forecasted going out. The green hash marks represent the ability to pay cash for capital during a year in which we have not, or the bonding debt service has been reduced to the point where we have some. So it's projected in the year 2021, we will have the ability to use some cash for capital, which we are doing. You can see that in the next couple of years, we are anticipating bonding primarily for the Henry James Middle School project that's underway. And then in the future, as we're aware, there's potential additional items like the long-range plan for the schools and other potential long-term projects for the town that will always be looked at in the future and will require funding going forward. All right, next. So those are the budgets that we are recommending to the town. They've been approved by the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed and by the Board of Finance. And if not officially, they will be at their board meetings. These are the budgets we presented. Tonight, we're going to have overview from Susan Salinas for the Board of Ed and from Eric Wellman for the Board of Selectmen, and as well as the capital budgets. And when we're done with those presentations, I'll be back and we will go through the comments that we received. At the end of that, I'll just go through this now and I'll go through it again, hopefully at the end. We will not close the public hearing tonight. We will leave it open. We will have a follow-up meeting on May 5th. You should note that date. Some of the earlier announcements had the next meeting potentially as May 7th, but we are going to hold it on May 5th at 6 p.m. Be held in a similar fashion to this meeting. And at that point, it's anticipated that the Board of Finance will send the final budgets then to a referendum. So with that, I will move, relinquish the microphone to Susan, who will present the Board of Ed's budget.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all tonight in this odd way. I'm going to walk you through the Board of Ed budget for this year. And give you our presentation. So thank you, Rob, for what you explained already. The Board of Ed, giving the Board of Ed the opportunity to review important pieces of our budget process and submission. In these very challenging times, the boards have worked hard together to move forward a budget that considers the complexities that we're all faced with. Our budget process timeline kicks off early in November when all three boards meet to discuss the context and fixed costs related to our budgets. At this time, the Board of Finance provided guidance to our board of a 2.5% increase in operating expenses. Over the course of the next several months, as you can see on the slides, we met and discussed and participated in presentations on various aspects of the development of the budget. Our process culminates in a presentation to the Board of Finance in March. We can go to the next, I think, 2 slides. Great. So this evening, I will provide some background information on contextual factors that impact our budget, such as enrollment and our strategic priorities. I will hit on the main financial drivers that represent the majority of our costs. The Board of Ed budget represents a cost increase of $1.4 million or 2.01% increase over last year's spending. There was several influencing factors in the development of our budget. We considered increased elementary enrollment and, as mentioned, followed the Board of Finance guideline to come in with a budget within the 2.5%, working to keep our mill rate under 40. Our challenge on an annual basis is to balance the current fiscal reality with our board's vision to continue to ensure we provide a world-class school system for our students and community. In the budget that we move forward for discussion this evening, we feel we've accomplished these goals. Go to the next slide, please. And so here you're seeing our reflected costs per pupil as opposed to our peer communities and our budget history, or a little glimpse of that. The next slide. We have spent significant time reviewing enrollment projections in our district as they relate to both staffing needs and facility needs. The slide highlights the projected change in enrollment from here into next school year by grade level. As you can see, our enrollment is projected to decline at the secondary level, but that decline is offset by the increase at the elementary level. In the end, our enrollment for next year is projected to be flat at 4,025 students. We see a significant shift in our projections moving forward, where we will see an increase of over 11% in our enrollment in a 10-year period. Next slide, there we go. One of the primary goals as a school district is to offer high quality programming and support students' areas of interest so that they can be prepared with a diverse set of skills needed to be successful in our ever-changing society. The graphic on the left represents our accountability index. The accountability index takes into account various factors in school districts ranging from academic achievement to program access to attendance patterns. It is a comprehensive review of a district's performance. The graphic on the right represents the elective offerings that represent various student pathways of interest that can be explored at Simsbury High School. These varied programs represent the diversity of options that our budgets have supported for our students. Maintaining this level of programming has been a focus of the boards for many years. Drivers of our 2021 budget. In presenting tonight, we want to provide data on the main drivers in the development process. We were able to offset costs in our budget by a reduction of FTE related to enrollment at the secondary level. FTE being full-time equivalents or teaching positions, staff positions. Next. The following graphic represents our largest budget driver, which is our personnel costs. Contracts represent an increase in close to $1.4 million over last year's budget, an increase of 1.95%. The teacher contract represents an increase of roughly $1 million and is our largest employee group. We are able to offset those increases each year by reducing the savings associated with retirement. When you net those two numbers out, our personnel costs increase is 1.6%. This budget supports improvements across several areas due to increased enrollment, At the elementary level, we will be adding 2 classroom teachers and needed special education staffing. These costs will be offset by reducing 5 positions related to our enrollment decline at the secondary level. In total, our staffing levels will reduce slightly by a total of 1.5 full-time positions. This slide summarizes the main drivers of the budget. The additions portion of the slide at the top represents the value of fixed contracts, new staffing requests that we discussed, and increases in insurance. In total, those costs are a 3.05% increase over last year's operating expenses. When we account for the value of the retirement savings and staffing reductions, as well as a reduction in technology spending, we reduce the overall increase by $700,000 and present a 2.01% increase. Our non-public schools budget represents a small portion of our costs associated with private school nursing and transportation mandates for those students in private schools in town. Our capital this year is one project. The priority for the maintenance of our IT infrastructure is the replacement of the district's aging servers. The servers are now 7 years old and incapable of running the latest version of the desktop virtualization software necessary to upgrade the desktops to Windows 10. Windows 7 is no longer supported by Microsoft, so this is a very necessary upgrade. And that's the Board of Ed budget for 2021.
Thank you, Susan. Next up will be Eric, I believe, doing the Board of Selectmen.
Hi, good evening, Rob. That's right. I'll be leading off with the operating budget and talking about some of the budget drivers this year. And then Selectman Sean Askham will be following me with the capital budget. So good evening. I am Eric Wellman, Simsbury's first Selectman. First of all, I just wanted to acknowledge the other members of the Board of Selectmen and thank them for their collaboration in this process. Deputy First Selectman Sean Askham, Mike Payne, Chris Peterson, Wendy Maxtudis, and Jackie Bados. The Board of Selectmen understands that we are facing unprecedented challenges for our residents and for our business community. And the intent of this budget is to reflect those challenges. Obviously, when this budget was first born, very early in 2020, we didn't know what was coming. And once the picture became clearer and how much some of our residents and business community was suffering, we felt strongly that we come in with a flat mill rate or perhaps less. And I thank the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance for their collaboration in that process as well. So the town operating budget is a little over $23 million. And to put that into perspective, that's about 1 in every 4 tax dollars that we pay. So about 25% of our taxes. It's an increase of about 4.5% over last year. It's also important to understand, though, that that does not equate to the taxes that we pay directly. When we factor in the Board of Ed budget, our capital budgets, the anticipated revenues and the growth in the grand list, as Rob Pomeroy said earlier in the presentation, this budget would result in a modest mill rate decrease that amounts to almost $50 for the median valued home. So the budget that we're presenting tonight is a little bit different than the budget that we initially presented to the Board of Finance. First, no change in the pension assumptions. So we had in our previous budget put additional dollars toward funding our pension obligations, and that is money that we know we're going to have to do. That's something that's going to have to happen in future years, but pensions are a long game over 2 decades, and this was not the year we felt to do that. We eliminated a new parks facility maintenance technician position. That's also a position that we believe is going to be necessary in order to maintain our parks at the level that our residents expect. But again, this was not the year to do that. We also removed 4 CNR, capital non-recurring projects, and 2 capital projects from the budget altogether. And we changed a funding source for 1 CNR project and 3 capital projects from cash to bonds. And what that does is it essentially allows us to pay for those things over numerous years, providing mill rate relief in the short term, which was our intent. I want to talk a little bit about the budget drivers. So when we talked about the operating budget increasing by about 4.5%, that's driven primarily by contractual salary increases, debt service, and pension OPEB. So when you look at these 3 things, what they have in common, these 3 things are promises. These are promises that we made to our employees, promises we made to our retirees, and promises we made to our creditors. So those are the things that are driving the increase in our operating budget. Next slide, please. We also wanted to highlight that there are 3 primary service changes in this budget. The first is an assessor inspection service. So to put this one into English, today when someone does a renovation to their home, be it a new kitchen or a pool, it could sometimes take up to 5 years before we capture those additional dollars in the tax rolls because of the revaluation schedule. So these additional services allow us to capture those dollars right away, ensuring that people are paying their fair share of taxes. And to us, this is really a no-brainer because we are going to be paying $25,000 for a service that's going to pay for itself 2 to 3 times over per year. And those are conservative estimates. The other is a police administration reorganization, which involves upgrading 1 sergeant position to a lieutenant and then hiring a deputy chief position. This change was really the highest recommendation of our police chief, the highest recommendation of our police commission, and our town manager. Of all of the improvements to our police department, this is something that really came out as the highest priority in order to maintain the top-notch police department that our residents deserve and expect. And the last is a restoration of $20,000 in funding for library materials. So these are primarily digital and print content. And at a time when we have such a tight budget and have done a lot to rein in, this is one area which is a small amount of money in the context of our entire budget, but it's actually a significant amount of money in the context of our library and their ability to purchase content for the benefit of our residents. And the time that we're living in now, when we're relegated to our homes, digital content in particular is something that is just so necessary and appreciated by our residents to be able to stay connected, informed, and entertained. Next slide. And I'll turn it over to Sean Askham.
Thanks, Eric. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me first. Excellent. Yep. Melissa's nodding her head. Beautiful. All right. We'll see on the slides here a large list of projects, and I'd be happy to go through them in detail. But first, let me give you some context for how the capital items, the CNR items, are paid for, budgeted, distributed. I know this is redundant for my peers on the phone, or the Board of Ed, the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Finance. But for the folks that are following along at home, there's many different mechanisms within the municipal space for us to pay for capital items, both on the short term and the long term basis. One of which is the CNR function, so capital and not reoccurring. These are typically the smaller items, as you'll see listed here: network storage, body armor, pickup trucks, small plows, etc. Another option would be reserves. Originally, we had intended to ask for funding in this space and have chosen not to, as Eric articulated earlier. The third space is through the general fund itself, and through the guidance of the Board of Finance over the years. The Board of Selectmen has worked hard to get more of these regular capital items into the general fund. I credit our former first selectman in particular, Lisa Hefner, for making sure that we get the plows and police cars and other things in there. Make sure that we're paying for those every year. The fourth source is bonding, and Eric did articulate that we chose to do some smaller projects within the scope of bonding, as well as our traditional larger projects. So all that rolls up to a number that impacts both the operating budget and then the capital budget. So you'll see, I'll revert back to the slides here. From a general funding standpoint, we're looking at again, maintaining our network storage. Our 2022 reevaluation is something that we fund over a 5-year period. We're statutorily obligated to do reevaluation every 5 years, both the larger full-scale walk-around, knock on doors, and then the smaller version on the off 5 years. So we fund that in this manner. We're doing some additional software, as I talked about. From a police department standpoint, there is a need to replace the soft body armor. I believe it's 20 of the vests. They do have a life, an expiration to them, and it's critical that these are replaced regularly and on time. The APHIS fingerprint system for the police department needs to be updated as well. It is at its useful life at this point, so that is part of the funding. Many folks have been impacted or seen trees being taken down in town, not only to reduce the risk of power line challenges, but unfortunately because of the invasion of the emerald ash borer. So you'll notice if you've been paying attention for a couple of years that the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance and the taxpayers have been funding an effort to take down the trees that are beyond saving within the or close to the public right of way that would endanger our roads or other assets in town. You'll see a pickup truck here for $42,000. And then some projects in terms of maintaining some of our fixed assets. The clubhouse at Simsbury Farms is long past its need to be stained, much like we stain or paint our houses on a regular interval. That structure needs to be maintained as well. The band shell needs to be maintained, and you'll see the staining for $20,000 there, as well as the farm's rec building. Our parks and golf maintenance garage ventilation system needs to be maintained. Right now, we don't have the best system up there, and it's important for the health and safety of our employees that we maintain this system. And then we've been undergoing a calculated and thoughtful upgrade maintenance of the rink equipment at Simsbury Farms, and the control panel is the next asset for that upgrade. Melissa, if you could keep going, thank you. There's a feasibility study. We're looking at the PAC and the Curtis Park areas. Folks generally ask questions of myself or others. Why do governments do studies? It really is important because of the location of these two assets next to contiguous to floodplains, some sensitive regulatory issues. It's important that we make sure we understand what we need to do, the permitting regulatory process before we go down there and try to pave these areas. It's important that we make the PAC in particular ADA accessible. We hear loud and clear that we need to address that parking lot. And this study is the first phase to make sure that we're dealing with that appropriately. We've also, as folks have talked about recently, and I think we'll hear later tonight, we have a lot of open space in parks, something that we need to maintain, and those signs need to be regularly maintained as well. The first selectman articulated earlier that we moved a smaller CNR project out to bonds, and this is it, the various drainage improvements. So when we pave roads, when we improve our assets around town, Tom Roy and his crew do a great job of making sure that the drainage is taken care of, so that when we pave, that pavement lasts for its useful life or beyond. You'll see a number of grants here. So a number of capital items are often funded in 2 or 3, sometimes 4 mechanisms. And you'll see here the dial-a-ride van is a partial grant spend, as is the body armor. There's also a truck coming out of Town Aid Road, which is state funding, and then another plow also out of Town Aid Road. Melissa, thank you. All right, the operating transfers, again, you heard me talk before about the plows and the police cars. This is being funded through the general fund side. We call it a CNR, we call it a capital project, but it's coming out of the general fund itself. Additional funds, as we talked about earlier, the dial-a-ride, this is the other portion to pay for this piece of equipment. We're also upgrading, or excuse me, not upgrading, we're replacing true supervisor cruisers, and that's coming out of the private duty fund. The mobile data terminals, important for the police departments. There's a lot of electronics, a lot of computers in these cruisers. They need to be maintained and updated on a regular basis as well. We are doing some minor repairs to the Eno clock tower. Obviously, the landmark in the center of town, it's important to maintain that. And thankfully, the town is the beneficiary of some trust funds to maintain that building. There's a need, as always, to replace the mowers, or one of the mowers down at the Simsbury Farms. Our farm staff does a great job of having these mowers live as long as they possibly can. There's hundreds and hundreds, thousands of hours on these pieces of equipment, and they get them down to the every last drop. But the Golf Equipment Fund is going to be stepping in to pay for one of those mowers this year. The sewer fund, so these are paid for improvements by the sewer users, so the folks that are connected to the sewer. There is a fund balance in there, and that capital fund pays for these improvements. So there's some improvements there on the Woodland Street and the Hot Meadow Street sewer upgrades. Melissa, if you mind. Thank you. This one, I'm particularly proud of town staff as far as on the bonding side, the radio system upgrade and replacement. Lieutenant Sifo and our deputy town manager, Melissa Appleby, worked extremely hard, as did others, to have this project come to fruition. If the taxpayers and others will remember, there was a study in the past to make sure that we were looking at all options. Figuring out the best way to do this. There are consultants that guide us through that. At the end of the day, Melissa and Fred were able to save us almost 50% on this project by partnering with the fire district. So while you do see $1.2 million here, know that this number was closer to 2.5, possibly 3 when we first started talking about this. So another example of professional management doing an outstanding job to save this community money. Highway pavement management. Tom Roy, again, and his crew do an outstanding job of maintaining the roadways in this town. There was a period of time where they were upgrading our roads. And for those that would like to know more about paving, there's a wonderful presentation that Mr. Roy does. The roads are, I believe, at an 85 or above from a rating standpoint. And he has shifted into maintaining that really high level of quality for the roads. And this is funding that helps us do that. The Public Works facility is actually sitting on the original foundation. The parking lot was never actually completed or finished when it was done long ago. And it's past time to address that parking lot and the drainage issues there to maintain that facility, obviously due to the heavy equipment and important usage down there. The Board of Selectmen has committed to maintaining and improving our sidewalks in town, and thankfully, the Board of Finance and the taxpayers have agreed that this is something that is a priority. So you'll see another $200,000 here to maintain and improve our sidewalks. And we're looking at the critical sidewalk needs around town to make sure that there's safe and connectivity where it makes sense. Susan did a great job talking about the district network infrastructure. Again, something that's been a regular item in the capital budget. It's important to maintain the connectivity for our school systems. Quickly going on the operating transfers. Again, just another piece of funding for how we pay for the roadway. It adds up to about $1.2 million in total for the paving that we spend on an annual basis. That's to maintain 165 miles of roadway, as Tom likes to tell us, from here to Maine, basically. Grants, again, the last piece for the paving management comes out of both LoSiP and Town Aid Road, which are both state-funded programs. And then a very large wing plow truck. This is one of the largest plows, and it is a critical item to making sure that our roadways are safe during heavier storms. Last two, I promise I will spare everybody any more commentary for the evening. One more for the sewer use fund. There's a secondary clarifier cover that needs to be done. The water is and the treatment plant guys do such a good job that we actually have freshwater coral growing down there. So these covers are needed to maintain and extend the useful life of the plant. And then the capital fund, the greenway improvements for $135,000. We all love our trails. We all love our rails to trails. We spend a lot of time on it, and it's important that we maintain that. You'll note some white lines in different places where the roots of trees have intruded upon the trail. And Tom Roy's crew did a good job, I believe 2 years ago, of maintaining the northern section and repaving. And it's time to address some of the southern section, which includes fencing, paving, and making that area safe. And that concludes capital.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate all the detail. Thank you. So at this point, what we're going to do is open the public hearing. Now, if we were meeting in the amphitheater at the high school, you could line up and give your comments. Obviously, we're not doing that tonight. But what we are going to do, and we really appreciate the response from this method of doing, is we had some order of magnitude about 35 individuals that have sent in comments, some questions. We're going to read these live into the record, just as they were submitted by email. And then at the end, I'll have sort of sum up in a couple of responses. I think the idea is this, obviously, and unfortunately is much less interactive than it would be if we were all doing this in the same room together. But we'll then continue the public hearing to the May 5th meeting, at which time we can have responses to unanswered questions or comments. And at that point, we will perhaps take additional comments before that. So Lisa Hebner has agreed to help me read these. So we're going to go through them and read them as they were submitted right into the record. And bear with us. Thank you. So the first public comment comes from Joan Coe. And again, I'm reading from her submittal. We are presently in a time of crises with many unknowns. There is a major disruption in the economy. The state and federal government will not have the revenues to fund the state expenditures, and the state will no longer be able to fulfill their commitment to the town. Federal and state government have encumbered huge debt that will not be forgiven. The COVID-19 virus has placed enormous pressures on industry, business, and residents' incomes. Property values will be greatly reduced, leading to a lower grand list. As a country, we are looking forward to a long recession that will impact everyone. This cannot be ignored in developing a budget. All models for developing a budget should be revised to a much lower collection rate and reduced revenues from other resources. It is not the time to manipulate the budget with more long-term debt. This is not the time for open space expenditures. The general fund should not be used to backfill the expenditures. With a recession on the horizon, the general fund will be needed to plug up unforeseen exposures, not to flatten the budget. The general fund will be expended with the domino effect of a recession. Political favors should be eliminated in the budget. Both the boards of selectmen and education should produce a flat budget, reducing all non-essential expenditures. Capital expenditures should be greatly reduced. All the expenditures in the wish list budget should be eliminated. The town should not be adding legacy costs with additional expenditures in a staff shuffle in the police department. There is no compelling need to have a deputy chief by adding management and reduce a sergeant on the front line that could add overtime costs. The schools have established a pay-to-play policy. Now is the time to require any enhancements on town and education property that directly benefit a group should be paid by the group. The taxpayers can no longer be expected to pay for non-essential expenditures. There are unfunded labor attorney costs that will escalate over time. Thousands of dollars in revenues will be required to pay employee settlements. The Board of Education can reconfigure the schools by adding a 6th grade to Henry James Middle School to reduce costs. The Board of Education feasibility studies recommendations should be shelved until the economy stabilizes. The Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen should produce a no increase budget. Now that the superintendent of the golf course is retiring, it is a good time to have the golf course managed by a professional golf association by reducing costs. Other towns have done this with desirable results. The Board of Finance should be presenting a budget that is a reflection of the uncertain times with greatly reduced expenditures and reduced debt. Do not kick the can down the road. Use your authority to act boldly and demand a no increase budget and reduce capital expenditures. All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter @JoanCo, and newsfeed on Facebook. Lisa?
This is from Danielle Selly, to whom it may concern. My name is Danielle Selly, and I am writing this email to express my interest in Simsbury purchasing the Meadowood property. As a lifelong resident and huge cheerleader for everything Simsbury, I am very passionate about keeping this beautiful town as natural and special for generations to come. The wonderful idea to make this land part of our community for recreation fields, hiking, and historical barns and preservation is amazing and an opportunity that we cannot pass up. I believe it will not only bring happiness and joy to our residents, but tourism, as this is a historical and beautiful place for all. Simsbury is really something special. Thank you for your time and consideration. The next email is from Mary Ann Joyce. If ever there was a time for no increase, this is it. Perhaps confer with Manchester and New Britain, which have offered no increased budgets. No excuses, no inflated rationalizations, simply no increase.
The next email comes from Jerry Wetchen. Dear members of the Board of Finance, I am writing as a member of the Simsbury community for more than 40 years and as a member of the Culture, Parks, and Recreation Commission, as well as a member of the Parks and Open Space Master Plan Committee and the Parks and Recreation Revenue Fund Analysis Committee. You are about to adopt a 2020-2021 budget in an extraordinary time in all of our lives, and I commend each of you and the Board of Selectmen in your thoughtful deliberations on the town's budget. I am concerned, however, that at your last meeting, the first item you cut from your budget was funding for the Parks and Recreation Department. As a CPR Commission member thoroughly involved in our parks budget, this is a common theme in the town's annual budget. Simsbury has done a wonderful job in its capital funding for parks and open space acquisitions. However, its annual operating expense funding has been abysmal. The soon-to-be-released Simsbury Parks and Open Space Master Plan highlights this as a major threat to our Parks and Recreation Department. The report specifically details the lack of funding for both staff and maintenance. A review completed March 11, 2019, provided by staff comparing the town of Simsbury Culture, Parks, and Recreation Department with 25 other similar communities showed Simsbury population ranked 11th out of the 25 communities surveyed. Simsbury had the third highest revenue total for recreation activities. Simsbury ranked 14th in general fund budget allocation. A review of the per capita cost analysis of 8 towns similar to Simsbury shows the following. The financial analysis of Simsbury's Park and Recreation General Fund shows the department is underfunded by more than 50% compared to the other similar towns. An additional $706,092 would be added to could be added to bring Simsbury up to the average per capita spending. Simsbury has the second lowest park and recreation budget. If the budget wasn't subsidized by $185,616 from the Board of Education as a reimbursement for athletic field maintenance, it would be ranked the lowest. Simsbury's general fund park and recreation per capita spending is the lowest. Simsbury's percentage of expenses in the town's general fund for park and recreation is the lowest. Simsbury's Park and Recreation Administration is the only town not funded by the general fund. Simsbury's general fund park and recreation per capita spending is $29 below the average of $68. Simsbury's percentage of expenses in the town's general fund for park and recreation is 30% below the average of 63.1%. I would urge you to consider this information before you decide to take away funding for the department. Regards. And then there's a chart that was supplied as well.
Next letter is from Dr. Michael Rinaldi. Question 1. How is it fair to give wage and step increases to town and Board of Education employees during a pandemic when taxpayers will be experiencing 15 to 20% unemployment and over a 30 million loss of employment? Why shouldn't all wage and step increases be postponed? Question 2. With the total student capacity of our 5 elementary schools, K through 6, of 2,387, and with the present enrollment at 2,038, why do we need potential portable classrooms at Latimer Lane School? Why isn't a modest redistricting of some students undertaken for the fall school year and put in place to maintain Board of Education class size guidelines? Question 3. Why did the Board of Education spend $200,000 on a facilities master plan and reconfiguration study and not wait for the results of that study while proceeding with $24 million phase 3 project when many on the board and administration knew of the possible recommendations by Tecton Architects? Both past and present chairman of the Board of Education and Superintendent Curtis were told of this before the phase 3 HJMS phase 3 project was put on the referendum, and the present chairman of the board and Mr. Curtis decided to proceed to referendum. Why? A $66 million mistake. Question 1. The Board of Selectmen's budgets have increased 24.75% over the last 5 years and 32.6% over the past 10 years, while the cumulative inflation rates during that time period were 7.8% and 19.5%. Why? Question 2, the Board of Education per pupil costs have increased over 11.9% over the past 5 years and 37.9% over the past 10 years, while the cumulative inflation rates during that time period were 7.8% and 19.5%. Why? Question 3, 30 years ago, the Simsbury school system was the 5th highest ranked school system in Durg A, with the per pupil cost ranked 129 out of 169 towns and cities. Presently, our school system is ranked 2nd in Durg B, with a per pupil cost ranked 92 out of 169 towns and cities. Why have our per pupil costs increased in comparison to the other 169 towns?
The next email is from Lauren Miller. I am writing today to ask for your support to increase the library's budget for materials in fiscal year 21 by $20,000. Over the last 10 years, the library's material budget has been essentially static, while community needs have changed and the patron base has expanded. The library staff has done an exemplary job of providing high levels of service to the community with minimal budgetary resource. But a lot has happened over the past 10 years, and a combination of changing demographics, increased material costs, and more demand for new resources have brought us to the point where the library simply cannot continue to keep pace with community needs. The Simsbury Public Library has one of the lowest amounts of expenditure on materials per capita in the state. While we are justifiably proud of the library's efficiency, the lack of increase in the material budget has kept our material expenditures per capita to $5.59, one of the lowest among comparable libraries. A recent study, which included Bloomfield, Farmington, and Avon, demonstrated that Simsbury is last among these local institutions when it comes to spending on library materials. I bring this to your attention not because we need to keep up with the Joneses, but because I am concerned that without appropriate funding, library services and materials will no longer be accessible to those who most need the resources our library should provide. Simsbury is a vibrant, active community, and our public library is arguably the center of this community, providing a wealth of information and programs that build community. Please help the library continue to enlighten, educate, and build our community by providing accessible materials to its patrons.
The next email is from Ann Erickson. Dear Board of Finance, libraries are vital to communities throughout our nation. This is especially true on the local level during this difficult time. Libraries in general, and the Simsbury Public Library in particular, have become town centers for sharing ideas, for learning in a digital age, and for connecting people with information. Yet, the borrowing and lending paper-bound books and materials, large print books, audiobooks, and ebooks remain part of the library's very foundation. I have visited the Simsbury Public Library at all hours and on all days of the week. Always the library is filled with residents of all ages, from the very young to our senior citizens. Books, both fiction and nonfiction, are being checked out, with the current and newest books being the most popular. On many occasions, these shelves, as well as the shelves for the Pronto books, have been almost bare. The number of books that the library has been able to purchase in the last fiscal year, as well as the years prior, are insufficient to meet the residents' needs. Simply stated, there aren't enough new books or materials for our residents who are looking to borrow them. Simsbury has the lowest material expenditure per capita in its reference group, which includes the much smaller town of Avon. Simsbury is very proud of its library and the role it plays in town. In order to remain a fundamental, dominant, vital, and integral part of our town's culture, the maintenance of its materials collection is essential. I urge you to support the proposed $20,000 increase in the materials budget in this year's proposed library budget. Thank you.
Next email is from Kenneth Waite. With all due respect, a $50 per year reduction in taxes for the median family falls far short in helping families in these difficult times. Most of us have suffered financially in one form or another, and we need all the help we can get. Since a lot of us are digging deep to just get by, I would think that our esteemed town leaders would do likewise in proposing as lean a budget as possible. Everyone is pitching in help survive this terrible virus, and the town should do their fair share as well.
The next email is from Susan Brackwitz to the Board of Finance and from Dr. Susan Brackwitz. I have the impression that the unfortunate inclusion of open space in the Culture, Parks, and Recreation budget has caused people to think that open space is much more expensive to maintain than it actually is. I strongly doubt that the cost of maintenance of town-owned open space left in its natural condition is anywhere near the cost of CPR needs, staff programs, constant maintenance of buildings and parks and playing fields, etc. I don't think that getting rid of any open space would add significantly to the money available for CPR. Ideally, open space and CPR should be two separate budget items, since they are very different and have very different needs. I think that one of the most important things that makes Simsbury such a special place to live is the amount and quality of open space we have. Before I got involved with the Ethel Walker Woods Preservation Project, I had no idea how many townspeople were intensely interested in keeping that forest and its wetlands intact, and how hard and long they were willing to work for it. Ever since then, town referenda and questionnaires and surveys have shown that taxpayers in Simsbury place a high value on natural open space in general. Some of its benefits are largely unseen ecosystem services such as carbon storage in trees and soils, protection of soils and the moisture and nutrients they contain, cleaning of air and water, cooling in the summer, and modulation of flooding events. In addition, these wild places together constitute a treasure house of wild things. Plants, animals, fungi, as well as the tiny organisms that are essential for keeping everything running, probably many of which are as yet unknown to science. Even small pieces of wild land are important in landscape where development continues apace. They are likely to be refuges for species whose original habitat has been severely altered or destroyed around them. In fact, one of these species is us. People who spend time in wild places feel that these places make a major contribution to their quality of life by enhancing their physical and mental health. As our town population continues to climb, more of these quiet places, not fewer, will be needed to continue to offer these important benefits. Clearly, our open space more than earns its keep. Please do not give away any of it or decrease the funding for it.
Next email is from Lisa Newell. As a regular visitor to Simsbury's open spaces, I want to urge the Board of Finance to make the protection and enhancement of Simsbury's open spaces and wild places a top priority in forming your budget considerations. Simsbury is a beautiful place because of its undeveloped land, and this brings visitors from nearby towns and around the state. People who visit Simsbury spend money in Simsbury. Open space brings quantifiable benefits to human health, quality of life, clean air, and water and biodiversity. Benefits that can only be achieved by protecting intact forests. Simsbury's open space is a tremendous asset to the town. Please protect it. Thank you.
Next email is from Jerry Epstein. This is in response to your letter of April 13th. I am a 50-year Simsbury resident with 3 children who have gone through the Simsbury school system. I am retired after 31 years with IBM, but am not unfamiliar with the public school teaching. After graduating from Northwestern with a BS degree in secondary education, followed by 2 years in the Army, I spent 3 years teaching algebra and geometry at Herrick's High School in New Hyde Park, New York. Having watched the way our school operate, I believe they need some changes. I'm convinced there is ample opportunity to improve the education process and at the same time achieve significant cost savings. Here are my suggestions. In the first 4 to 5 weeks of the school year, teach one subject only all day with a break for lunch. By the end of that period, students would take a final exam just for just that subject. There could still be quizzes and homework assignments. In the next 4 to 5 week periods, 3 other subjects would be taught the same way. 4 to 5 weeks should be sufficient to cover any subject. School sports and other non-academic activities can remain after the school day. Scheduling classes this way eliminates the practice of students moving from room to room 4 or 5 times a day, wasting weeks of time out of the school year. It is also a better way to teach. Finally, I would take full advantage of the best teacher of each subject. Lectures, presentations, and explanations by the best should be available to all students through computer technology that exists today and is widely used in industry.
The next comment is from Wanda Coleman. Dear members of the Board of Finance, it was my pleasure to take part in the Parks and Rec study last year and was delighted by the study results showing a deep appreciation and enjoyment of our parks and open spaces by Simsbury residents. We love to get outdoors and enjoy nature. I have read all 54 pages of proposed upkeep and improvements and support most of it, except for any enhancement of motorized access, including automobiles and motorized mountain bikes, which will come if mountain bikes are allowed in any park. As for Terriffill Park, I realize that hunters, fishermen, picnickers, and paddlers need to drive to the point in Terriffill Park, but because of the water table at road level, most of the time, a plain gravel road would be a lot cheaper and easier to maintain without encouraging speeding and off-road mudding. I wish there was some way to close the park at dusk and open it at dawn. As soon as one passes over the culvert just before the softball field to the lower end of the park, no matter how much money is spent, nature will prevail, and this small but very special open space deserves minimal vehicle traffic, and paving is futile and a big waste of money. Also, only the whitewater kayakers who are headed for the gorge and the summer camps who teach whitewater kayaking put in at the old railroad crossing, so only minimal clearing of fallen trees would be needed there. It would be very dangerous to encourage non-expert paddlers to put in there instead of at the point. Yes to pickleball, exclamation point. No need for an expensive straightened out parking lot, and there's no need to move the kiddie playground. The plan seems to be in a wetland area, would require fill, and is definitely too close to foul balls. And there is a nice sign for Terriffill Park just above the tennis courts, which perhaps could just be moved up to the entrance.
The next letter is from John and Judy Schaefer, Simsbury Board of Finance. We strongly support natural open space in Simsbury. We are very concerned about the recent discussions about the town divesting itself of some open space parcels. Simsbury's open space is important to the image and experience of Simsbury. The ongoing cost of open space, especially natural open space, is low, particularly when one considers the benefits that Simsbury residents gain from it. The town can save money on our current natural open spaces, such as Ethel Walker Woods, Stratton Brook, and Onion Mountain, by leaving them as they are and not improving them. That will save the capital expenditure and the maintenance costs for hard facilities. Many residents have worked very hard to conserve that natural open space for nature and passive human activities. We urge you to preserve our open space land and not get rid of it. Thank you for your service.
The next email is from Bill Cordner to the Board of Finance. I am a long-term resident of Simsbury, and one of the most important things that I love about our town is our open space. Please ensure that Simsbury continues to be a leader in preserving all of our open space, and don't support any efforts to give away or sell small sections of our precious property. We need to preserve this asset for future generations, and we need this asset to help fight global warming and to protect wildlife habitat. Please feel free to contact me if you would like to discuss this issue.
The next email is from Phyllis Bornstein. As a resident of the town of Simsbury, I feel we should leave the budget as is. Yes, we can decrease taxes for each household by $50, but at this time we should plan for the unknown happening. We need to keep Simsbury ahead of the unforeseen in the near future.
Next, we heard from Aaron Levitt Smith. As a member of the Simsbury community, I wanted to send an email to the Board of Finance, letting them know that I strongly support open space in town ahead of the discussion on the budget. Any way to preserve our beautiful town and the open space we have, I strongly urge the Board of Finance to support efforts to preserve and avoid plans that say they offer financial possibilities that are really not the windfall it reports to be. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
The next email is from Gail K. Ryan, members of the Board of Finance. I am writing you as a former member of the Simsbury Library Board of Trustees and a town resident to ask you to please increase the library materials budget by $20,000 that is in the proposed budget. For the past 10 years, this budget has been stagnant, while the rest of the budget has seen needed increases in funds for personnel and facilities. The materials budget includes more than hard and soft cover books, the cost of which have certainly increased substantially in the past 10 years. It also includes other formats such as ebooks, which can be read on Kindles, Nooks, and iPads and smartphones. However, the cost of these to the library is significantly higher than the physical books, although they can still only be read by one patron at a time. It is now time to increase the budget to allow for more and newer reading materials in all formats to be purchased.
Next email is from Alan Kramer, to whom it may concern. Pursuant to the letter I received, and as a town resident, I'd like to offer my thoughts on the budget and taxes. With all of the town schools being closed since March, I would think there would be some major cost savings. These would include reduced utilities, reduced janitorial and admin costs, reduced daily police presence at schools, hopefully other costs. Realizing that the education budget is by far the largest budget item, I would hope it would create savings from the current year's budget that can be applied toward next year. I hope the town has a firm grasp on these savings. More importantly, Simsbury is known to have a relatively high mill rate, which makes the town less affordable and attractive to young families to move into. I strongly believe that for Simsbury to continue to prosper, it needs to keep its tax rate and burden on its residents as low as possible. This is particularly true after the current financial downturn due to coronavirus. Many town residents are out of work and most small businesses are greatly suffering. Given these dire financial circumstances, I would expect and hope the town would do all in its power to significantly lower the tax rate for the next budget year. Many people will fall behind on many of their bills and obligations, so that a tax reduction this year would be most welcome. even if it means cutting some town programs.
The next email is from James Marsh to the Town of Simsbury Finance Committee. Here is a follow-up email for the Finance Committee. Since they will be meeting virtually, would you see that they get this? I am writing a follow-up email to the Finance Committee with regard to next year's fiscal year 21 budget. I urge you to use your veto authority to cancel new funding for all new positions next year. As you know, Connecticut is in a world of hurt. With each day that passes, more bills come due with no income with which to pay them. I'm sure you're all very proud, rightfully so, of the budget you've crafted where taxes are actually set to decrease. But with things getting worse by the day, the town of Simsbury is certain to run into budget trouble sooner than we can believe. But this will play out differently than we can see from here and affect us all greatly in ways we have yet to anticipate. I worry about unpaid commercial rents, leading unfortunately to business loss and foreclosures, affecting local and commercial banks. Lots of people have already stopped working and have zero income. Even the homeless guy with his sign in front of REI has disappeared due to lack of traffic. My point is, we will all be greatly affected by this, but the full effects cannot possibly be known at this time. So why at this time commit to new spending for non-essential positions? Deputy police chief at $180,000 and an accountant at $75,000. Over 10 years, this will cost the town's taxpayers almost $3 million and add to that the pension and other benefits. There will be so much new need with much less revenues we can't even begin to anticipate. Even if some side deal has already been made, or even worse, these positions have already been slotted for someone, now is not the time. I just ask the committee to step back, reflect until the full fallout of this unprecedented time becomes evident. Create a little margin in next year's budget. Please exercise fiscal prudence during this extremely uncertain time and veto these new discretionary positions. Thank you, and thank you for serving our great town.
Next comment is from Jane Moose. I strongly support open space in Simsbury with no infringement upon it for mountain biking.
The next email is from Diane Nash. Why suddenly has open space fallen into disfavor, attacked by Board of Finance people suggesting if it costs so much, sell it? Is this due to a mistaken job description that included natural open space with parks and recreation? The combining of open space and parks and recreation inflates the data by adding all the acreage and skews the budget by grouping maintenance and upkeep for our active areas, pools, golf course, tennis courts, and defined parks with maintenance on natural open space lands. It misleads consultants who combine the TOS open space acreage with other towns' PNR acreage, and then recommends more personnel be added and more dollars spent. The survey was done and the question was asked. The public wants nature. A far different kind of attention and far less expensive is needed for natural open space. When people on the BOF see this budgetary request for more money, more personnel, they are led to believe it is for open space, natural open space. Before we even think about selling a single parcel, the Parks and Recreation Director should be required to separate any and all requests for maintenance of natural open space and carefully review all of these costs. Bring those proposed actions to the Open Space Committee to endorse which ones, if any, they support. And only then should money be allocated from perhaps a contingency budget fund. The request to the Board of Finance would simply be made for the defined parks by parcel and active recreation areas, so it can be carefully reviewed as to what is a legitimate expense and what is a nice to have. Extra personnel requested should be denied, and maybe even in place, staff should be reviewed to see if there's a more efficient way to do business. We have always used volunteer groups, example, SLT cleanups on their properties, the flower bridge, the beautification plantings, the free concerts. Why suddenly has the Park and Rec group padded the budget with these inclusions? It may be a misunderstanding of what the PNR director was hired to do. It may be an ask for the sun and happy to get the moon way of formulating a budget. Either way, for both job description and budget clarity, it needs to be redefined and before damage is seriously done.
Next, we heard from Danielle Diermo. I just want to let the town know how valuable all the open space is in Simsbury. All remaining natural space should be protected and preserved for future generations. It can be left in its natural state and not overly maintained. Ethel Walker is a location that should be preserved and protected. More open space should be procured and preserved in the town, and building and development should be curtailed. It has gotten out of hand.
The next email is from Rosemarie Hargrave to the Board of Finance. As a homeowner in the town of Simsbury for 48 years, kindly be advised that I strongly support open space in this town I love so well. It is a precious resource that needs to be preserved. As a senior, the preservation of our open spaces, what sets this town apart from many others, is what keeps me here. Please value it as much as I do.
Next email is from Amber Abul to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and Town Manager. I am writing in support of the $20,000 increase to the Simsbury Public Library's material budget for the upcoming fiscal year. These funds will be used primarily to enhance the library's digital material offerings, which are already in great demand and will likely be even more highly requested as many people continue social distancing. Further, digital materials allow the library to reach some of the most vulnerable members of our community, including people with limited physical access to the library or audio-visual challenges. This investment is also necessary to keep our library's materials collection on par with other local libraries. For instance, materials expenditures for fiscal year 2019 showed Simsbury's investment at $6.41 per resident, compared to Avon's at $9.37, Farmington's at $7.91, and West Hartford at $7.09. Please support this additional expenditure of $20,000 for library materials so that the Simsbury Public Library may continue to provide not only excellent programming and service, but also up-to-date and relevant materials for our patrons.
The next email is from Helen Peterson. To the members of the Board of Finance, I write in support of the annual budget as presented, fiscally and environmentally responsible. More specifically, I speak in support of continuing Simsbury's leadership role in land conservation, both in its natural state as well as in continued agricultural use. Through our very actions of conservation over the years, the people of Simsbury have proven time and again, beyond any doubt, that conserved land is a public asset held in the public trust for the public good. Conservation of open space is the ultimate win-win for all of us, our health, our quality of life, and the life of our endangered planet. As a reminder, throughout all our community's conservation efforts, studies have proven convincingly and repeatedly the high value and lower cost of conserved land rather than the higher cost to a municipality of developed land. These studies are updated and can be readily identified and assessed. Also, as a reminder, in the many years of ardent conservation dialogue and in the most recent town survey of over 1,000 citizens, the conservation ethic of our community rings loud and clear. Respectfully, Helen Peterson.
Next comes from Ralph Martin to the Simsbury Board of Finance. As invited by the April 13th letter from the Board of Education, I write to share my comments on their notification. I strongly support all efforts to avoid any increase in taxes for the coming year and efforts to reduce taxes. Taxes have become a great burden, especially for those on fixed incomes. Thank you for your work in this regard.
The next email is from Shannon Naw. Dear members of the Board of Finance, thank you for your diligent continued service to our town during these uncertain times. My question is in regard to special education funding. If you are familiar with the nature of special education, there are periods of time during which students receiving special education services are more likely to experience something called regression. This could occur over summer break, Thanksgiving, December, or spring breaks. This means that a student will experience a loss in educational gains, social development, or behavior management. For many students in special education, Regression occurs during a time when service implementation is interrupted, not delivered, or delivered inconsistently or inappropriately, according to the student's legal right under IDEA and through the IEP, Individualized Education Plan. This is one reason students in special education often require and receive extended school year services, ESY, during the summer months. As I'm sure you will recognize, we are in the prime circumstance for regression. Hartford Current reporter Josh Kovner has done several pieces on the subject. In a normal school cycle, should regression be a topic for IEP discussion, the issue of how to reverse the inability to maintain skills would be addressed. The provision of services is ultimately driven by budgets. Due to the likelihood of operational cost savings while school is not in session, it would seem that there is an opportunity to address the needs of special education students who will likely experience regression until a regular school schedule begins. I understand that the BOE cannot solely absorb these costs, and since the BOF will likely experience their own cost savings, I am hopeful that at least some of the monies will be allocated to support those within our community who require the assistance. I will add that the services through IEP are legally required under the IDEA. And again, while we are in extraordinary times, some level of compensation should be implemented. This request is not a suggestion that every student in special education will require compensatory services at the same intense level of intervention, because as we know, special education is not a location. It is a service to an individual with individual needs. The IEP team can best assess those needs. I'm happy to speak with you about this further, but I truly hope that Simsbury will make these students a priority in our pandemic recovery efforts. Best, Shannon Moll.
Next email is from Elizabeth Burt to the Simsbury Board of Finance. Please support the proposed budget for the Simsbury Public Library. As you know, operating expenses and staff salaries have increased over the years, but the budget for acquisitions has not. As materials supplied to you by the library director show, our allocations for material expenses has gradually decreased by $10,000 over the last 10 years. And when compared to other libraries in our part of Connecticut, we spend the least percent of our total budget on acquisitions per capita. The Simsbury Library is a vibrant and vital resource to our community that serves residents of all ages, from infants to seniors. Please help keep our materials up to date and relevant to this community by supporting our request for an additional $20,000 in funds for material expenses. Sincerely, Elizabeth Burt.
The next email is from Kathleen Miller. To members of the Board of Finance, Simsbury, Connecticut, library materials budget request fiscal year 2020 to 2021. I'm writing in support of the $20,000 increase to adult teen business material budget request for fiscal year 2020-2021. Beginning in fiscal year 2010, spending on library materials has declined from a high of $174,847 in fiscal year 2010 to $164,200 in fiscal year 2020, or a 10.6% of total budget in fiscal year 2020, from a high of 12.6% in fiscal year 2010. The 10-year decline in spending has led to an inability of the library to keep pace with comparable communities in providing patrons with materials. I ask that you consider this modest budget increase so that the Simsbury Public Library can return to the same level of patron service as in past years, as well as provide for the future. Sincerely, Kathleen Miller.
Next email is from Marianne O'Neill. I'd like to thank the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance for their past and ongoing support of our Simsbury Public Library. The library is a wonderful resource for all residents of Simsbury. It is the town's multi-generational gathering place and destination for early literacy, technology access, hands-on learning, and volunteer opportunities. The importance of the library to town residents is demonstrated by over 370,000 visits annually. I would like to ask for your support to increase the library's material budget for fiscal year 21 by $20,000. The material budget has basically been the same for the past 10 years. A recent analysis of similar libraries shows our material expenditures per capita of $5.59 to be the lowest in the study, which included Bloomfield, Farmington, and Avon. While the budget and expenditures over this time frame have been flat, the needs of the community have increased, as well as new and expanded ways to meet our residents' needs. Resources and content have expanded to include visual, audio, and digital formats. 10 years ago, the main focus and availability of materials were standard books. Today, many more books are available in large print, which aids our residents with visual challenges. Audiobooks are available for those who can no longer read or those that enjoy a book while driving, walking, hiking, or other activities. The biggest increase in demand has been in the digital arena. Ebooks enable the library to be open 7/24, giving patrons access whenever and wherever they are. The situation today with our stay-home guidelines magnifies the need to address and increase this digital material collection. Today, instead of buying a standard copy of a bestseller, we also purchase a large print copy, an audiobook, and a digital copy in order to serve all of our residents. The need and demand for these additional media materials has increased, but the material budget hasn't. Please support this $20,000 increase to the library's material budget to enable us to maintain our excellent level of service to all the residents of Simsbury. Thank you.
The next email is from James Marsh to the Simsbury Finance Committee. I am writing with regards to the upcoming budget. There are two new positions under consideration, the Deputy Police Chief and the new accountant position. Regarding the new Deputy Chief position, I feel Simsbury is a small enough and safe enough town where this admin position is just not needed. With all the recently added new apartments, the population has grown some, so if any positions are added, they should be patrol officers. $183,000 is a lot of money to be adding at this time for a want, not a need. Ditto the accounting position, 70,000 something. With the coronavirus hitting the economy, the results are sure to be devastating. Whatever the state of Connecticut promises for fiscal year 21, it is sure to be significantly less. Even if federal funds are available for 2021 as a pass-through to the town, please be conservative and err on the side of caution. You know the state will be trouble at some point. Remember too, all these positions add legacy costs, pensions, OPEB, etc., that are a drag in the budget for future years. Please be cautious at this time and delay adding these new positions until another time. Thank you for serving and thanks for listening. Sincerely, James Marsh.
Next, we heard from Frederick and Marlene Peterson. There are paths cut through mountain farms which are used and appreciated by many in mountain farms and other areas. Property along the footpaths is owned by the town. There are many trees and shrubs on this town-owned property. We need some funding for town employees to cut down dead and dying trees, as well as a town pickup for broken branches which fall and clutter the area. Mountain Farms provides volunteer cleanup 2 times a year, but there is no way to get rid of the debris. My home is adjacent on 2 sides by town-owned property, as well as other families' homes. Funds are needed for this area as the trees in need of help tend to break off at the top and fall to the paths, creating a danger to walkers and children.
The next email is from Donna and Tracy Page. My husband and I would like to support the $20,000 increase to the Simsbury Public Library materials budget. The library is an integral part of the community, and we feel it will be even more utilized in the days ahead as our country gets back on its feet. Thank you for your consideration.
And that includes all of the email and public comment contributions that we received prior to 4 o'clock today. I really want to thank sincerely everyone who contributed and appreciate the information, the passion, and the sharing of your views with all 3 boards. I think that it will be appropriate for us to share these questions and comments with each of our boards. And because we're going to continue this public hearing till May 5th, we will consider all of this input and respond accordingly on May 5th. Are there any questions or comments from any of the Board of Finance members? Just give you an opportunity.
Rob?
Yes.
I wanted to echo your thanks to the community who took the time to give their input on this budget process during this strange budget hearing when there's no public present. And I did want to let folks know that these are posted online, all the comments, and to thank everyone for all their efforts.
Thank you, Lisa. Linda, can you take Linda off mute?
Yeah, thank you. I want to say that I'm really pleased with how many people wrote in comments. We've gotten, actually, maybe we should do this in the future because we get more participation virtually than we do at actual town meetings where people show up. So that's a good thing. I just want to respond to a theme that came up quite a bit that I'm curious about, where it seems that a lot of people think that somewhere along the line there have been a lot of proposals to sell off Ethel Walker Woods and other parcels of open space. And I have not heard that before, certainly not on our board. And so I'm just wondering if anybody else knows the genesis of those comments.
Yeah, I was going to speak to that in just a second. So you're right.
Terrific. Thank you.
Art, Kevin, Derek?
I would just simply say this was very productive. I think you've run a good tight ship here in a new format, and it's good to hear from everybody. I have no additional comments to offer, Rob.
Great, thanks, sir.
I'll just say I thought everybody did a great job, Rob and Sean and everybody you presented today. So thank you. I hear the outpouring of support for the funding of the Simsbury Library program materials. I think it's just important to me, although it seems like $20,000 is something that we should be able to accommodate. I would just repeat my question about, today digital media is often subscription based. So is this just a one-time ask for 20,000, or what portion of it is subscription based such that it'll be added to the budget on an ongoing basis? And then just lastly, thanks to everybody at Fitzgerald's. You guys are doing an awesome job supporting the community, and I think you have a lot of support coming out of this. So it's just a little thank you to the people at Fitzgerald's.
So Derek, I think we'll have a chance to discuss the library thing at our meeting on the 5th. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, perfect.
I just want to thank everybody for putting the time and effort in, and just kind of echo a lot of what has already been said. I think, this budget season, a lot of the numbers have already been discussed and reviewed. I think the heavy lifting will come next year and following budget years.
I'm sorry, do we know who's speaking? I have to ask.
I think that was Kevin, Rob. Kevin, your audio is not coming through very well. If you want to maybe try calling back in, or.
I thought so too, but I didn't recognize his voice. I'm sorry. The audio was so different. All right. Okay, so just a couple of comments.
That was Kevin. Sorry.
Yeah, the audio connection is bad.
Okay.
So I'm going to respectfully move on, because that's not, we're not communicating with whoever that is that's talking. So And Kevin, if it's you, your screen is frozen, and so we can't really get what you're trying to tell us, and I apologize for that. With respect, just a couple of comments I wanted to add from the Board of Finance, and I appreciate the presentations that both Susan, Eric, and Sean gave. I did want to mention that the element of the original, one of the original drivers for the Board of Finance was to try to continue to reduce the pension rate assumption. And at the end, in order to come up with a budget that was more affordable for our taxpayers, we have deferred the reduction of the interest rate assumption, but it will not go away. And I think Eric mentioned that, and as well as Susan. So this is something we are going to have to take up in the future, and we will. With respect to open space in general, there is no real element of open space in this coming 2021 budget. There was an item that was a potential capital project for that budget year, but it has, we discussed it early on and eliminated it, indicated from the Board of Finance to the Board of Selectmen that we did not think it was appropriate to include. That's the Meadowood project. But there is no action that we're aware of at the Board of Finance to sell any open space or otherwise curtail those. So all of those will come before both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance in due course and be reviewed on their individual merits at the time. Did Maria or anyone else, Eric, want to add anything to that?
No, Rob, I think that's a good summary.
Okay, all right. So based on that, I would ask if anyone else had anything else to contribute to tonight, because what we're going to do, as I said a couple of times, is we're going to continue the public hearing till May 5th. The information that was shared with us through these public comments will be considered and, if appropriate, responded to on May 5th or otherwise. And we are still anticipating that we will, at perhaps that May 5th meeting, refer these budgets to referendum. That would require that we actually hold a vote. That would happen in late May, early June, which is past Governor Lamont's target date for opening back up. But I also am very aware that even when the economy opens up, there could be still social distancing issues that may lead to the fact that we will do this by an alternative method rather than an actual vote referendum. But so stay tuned for that. But right now the schedule is as planned and shown on our website, the town website. All right. So with no other business for tonight's meeting, Linda?
Just a quick comment. There were, most of the comments we got were actually comments, but there were a bunch of questions as well. And so I just want to make sure those are going to be answered at the next meeting.
We will make every attempt to answer them to the extent we can. All right.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. All right. So appreciate everybody's participation. I would be looking for a motion to adjourn tonight's Board of Finance. Moved and seconded by Art. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We look forward to continuing this discussion on May 5th. Thank you, everyone.